Video games have at times held onto their traditions as a badge of honor, and the Yakuza series is no different. Here's a list of 10 tropes in Yakuza Kiwami 2 that probably should be retired in future games. Number 1. Characters wearing the same clothes. Video games have had this concept that characters should wear the same clothes in case the player should ever get confused who they're controlling. Costumes have also in the past defined if the character has special powers. But in Yakuza Kiwami 2, almost all the characters wear the same clothes like it's Groundhog Day every day. This concept might work for a more cartoonish game like Mario. But for a game that's trying to emulate real life and with an audience that is mostly adult, it really makes no sense that Kazuma Kiryu has been wearing this costume for the last 15 years. In fact, the devs were obviously bemused enough to give Kiryu a different costume in the prequel in Yakuza 0. Could you imagine a movie or a TV series where the characters wear the same clothes movie after movie or season after season? Number 2. Drunk animation. If you drink too much in the game, Kiryu will start to walk all over the place, and the player won't be able to walk in a straight line. While this probably seemed like a good idea in the initial design phase, it becomes frustrating and ruins the fun in practice. It's like having to control the character with a broken controller, and it only gets worse when violent gangs are chasing you down. Remember games that used to invert the controls to annoy you randomly? It's like that. That's what you get for drinking too much. Number 3. Consuming food boosts health. While this probably applies to 75% of all video games, in the Yakuza series consuming food for health affects the gameplay in a variety of ways that really needs an update. For one, the only way to consume food items and health drinks is through the inventory, which takes gamers out of the action. Even a simple toggle like in Neo, where you bring up a secondary set of 4 shortcuts for items, would help immensely. Yakuza also prides itself on tying the social and cultural aspects such as eating out with the game, but it hasn't really expanded the concept since its PS2 days. It's still the same: select an item off a menu, watch a 5-second cutscene, and gain experience points and health. The thing is, any time that something is done repetitively ad nauseum requires change. And that change could be as easy as just not having to eat out as many times as the game wants you to. Number 4. Bumping into people while running. When the first Yakuza game came out on the PS2, it was a fairly impressive looking game. The streets were bright and colourful and heavily populated with NPCs. Bumping into people was realistic and a cool effect that highlighted something that wasn't possible on older hardware. Fast forward to 2020, and bumping into people is really just an annoying way to slow you down. It was fine for its time, but it's unnecessary when you just want to get from point A to point B. Here's the solution: keep the middle of the street free of people. Number 5. Female characters. In an old interview talking about the history of Yakuza, Toshihiro Nagoshi, the head of the Yakuza team, talks about how he wanted to create a series just for the adult male audience, and the series still carries much of this influence to this day. While the series in general respects all genders equally, it still appears as though the game creators still see the game through the eyes of the average male fan. This is a game that creators think the average male fan might agree with, so we constantly see females in secondary roles or females needing to be rescued by thugs or abusive boyfriends. And here I disagree with this approach, when the creators should be the ones setting the narrative and creating better female characters. In Yakuza Kiwami 2, Kaoru gets slapped by a thug, and it's Kiryu who steps in and beats him up. But we've seen Kaoru beat up thugs during gameplay, only to get slapped during a cutscene. Why? I'd expect her to teach them a lesson. Once again, let's never mind the ludonarrative dissonance, it's the story that's important. Number 6. Horny male minigame. Softcore is fun, but have you seen real porn? The thing about Yakuza's insistence to push the boundaries on softcore is that it's blindly pushing against the resistance from fans that have grown out of these types of games. It might have been funny or even daring in the past to have these minigames in the past, but times have changed, And there's a weird disconnect when Kiryu needs to pop into the photogravure minigame just before he has to do something urgent like go and rescue Haruka. Those photos don't take themselves, you know. From a real world perspective, it's especially awkward to play the game knowing that the kids could pop in at any minute and dad has to explain what he's doing. That doesn't mean the game should remove all the adult content in the game, like the advertising plastered all over town. But in Yakuza Kiwami 2, the photo shoot minigame sticks out compared to the rest of the game. Do you agree or disagree with this opinion? Let me know in the comments below. Number 7. Cognitive dissonant violence. If there's one thing that completely makes no sense in this modern age of gaming, it's that characters can take a complete beating and wind up perfectly fine during gameplay. Kiryu can take a rocket launcher or machine gun to the face and leave completely unscarred. There seems to be unwritten video game rules that say that it's not so important what the weapon is, but it's the damage that you take that counts. To further compound all of this, you can regain your health by eating a few beef bowls. I also have problems with the story glorifying Kiryu as a virtuous man, given the fact that his heat moves are completely devastating, some of which include sticking a knife or sword into someone. Yes, I know it's a video game, and there's probably a real conversation to be had where one should draw the line on when the violence is overboard. And I think Yakuza is probably a good starting point. As games get more realistic, I'm asking myself, would Yakuza as a movie, where Kiryu exhibits the violence he does during the gameplay, make any sense from a narrative perspective, given he's supposed to be the messenger of peace? Number 8. Padded dialogue. One thing that has been a near constant with the Yakuza series is that on the whole, there is far more padded writing than is really necessary. The writers seem to ramble onwards trying to hit an imaginary excessive word count than actually want the players to save time and get straight into the action. Sometimes the player will have a dialogue for 5 minutes before having a fight for 20 seconds, when it really should be the other way around. There's a case to be made for people who enjoy story and dialogue. And there's definitely a segment of the audience that enjoys visual novels that also likes Yakuza, but in general, by and large, the actual dialogue is dry and uninteresting. Number 9. Press X to run. Any game that still has to press or hold X to run is committing seppuku in my book, in terms of game mechanics. The fact is, the DualShock analog stick has walk and run built into it, so pushing forward all the way should be running, and not walking. What's worse is that it was perfectly fine in Yakuza 0, so it was mind-numbingly bad for the games on the Dragon engine to have X as the run button. And the fact that during action and fight sequences, the game switches over to run being on the analog stick mean there's literally no reason X is run in the first place. Does anybody walk ever around the city of Kamurocho? Number 10. Armor not actually worn. It's one thing to excuse armor not shown as armor that's actually worn under the costume. It's another thing to excuse it when Kiryu fights shirtless. So the question is, where's the armor now? And just how does one person put on 3 sets of body armor, including chainmail, bulletproof vests, and a full plate mail under their costume? It looks like Kiryu prefers slim cut suits anyway. Oh well, I guess that's just video games. In conclusion, Yakuza is my favorite video game series. It's the only one I played and completed every mainline title, and it's my badge of honor however small that is. Don't think for a second I'm criticizing the game because it's terrible. It's not. It just has a bunch of holdover design issues, some of which have been ignored for 15 years, some of which has been excused away because it's video games, and some of which should be retired since many people have moved on. The Yakuza studio make great games, and I'll be there for the next one. This is just constructive criticism to make their next one even better. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like it, make sure to subscribe. I'll have a Yakuza Kiwami 2 review coming up, so be sure to check that out.